Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight, analyzing the Charleston terror attack. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. As we told you last night, there were a number of dubious statements made after the 21-year-old terrorist, Dylann Roof, slaughtered 9 innocent people in a South Carolina church. Today, Roof was issued $1 million bond in a Charleston courtroom where family members of those murdered got to speak to him.
You took something very precious away from me. I will never talk to her ever again. I will never be able to hold her again. But I forgive you.
You have killed some of the most beautifulest people that I know. Every fiber in my body hurts. And I'll never be the same.
Clearly, anyone who lost a loved one in that terror attack deserves to be heard, no matter what they say. But not so much those who are trying to exploit the situation. Let's run down some worthy statements as well as some foolish comments. First, CNN commentator Michaela Angela Davis.
This is terrorism, and the reason why I'm using those words is partly to bring the history current, because that's how it felt to those living in the Jim Crow South. That's what the Ku Klux Klan is, a terrorist organization. And up until this generation, I don't think we have the courage to call it what it is.
Ms. Davis is correct. What Dylann Roof did is flat-out terrorism. He did not murder someone for profit or for any other concrete reason. He simply wanted to terrorize black Americans. Next up, Senator Rand Paul.
There's a sickness in our country. There's something terribly wrong, but it isn't going to be fixed by your government. It's people straying away. It's people not understanding where salvation comes from.
Mr. Paul is also essentially correct. The government cannot fix disturbed people like Dylann Roof. American society has veered away from moral judgments into a world where most everything can be justified with an excuse, thus making it easier for psychopaths to act out. Now, let's get into race and politics.
The public discourse is sometimes hotter and more negative than it should be, which can, in my opinion, trigger people who are less than stable. I think we have to speak out against it. Like, for example, a recent entry into the Republican presidential campaign said some very inflammatory things about Mexicans. You know, everybody should stand up and say, that's not acceptable.
Secretary Clinton referring to Donald Trump, who wants to stop illegal immigration from Mexico by building a wall. Mrs. Clinton obviously finds that offensive. But to inject that issue into the Charleston analysis is strange, to say the least. She's introducing a totally unrelated situation to the terrorism in Charleston. The only thing I can think of is she's trying to mobilize Hispanic support. And then there are the race hustlers.
The problem is we can't eliminate these types of incidents if we don't get at the source of the problem. And the source isn't individual crazy people. The source of this is white supremacy.
White supremacy? Good grief. That's like saying the Black Panthers are sweeping across America, inciting violent acts from African Americans. Now, I'm sure all of you see white supremacists walking around your town nearly every day, don't you? That kind of lunacy makes a mockery out of serious people trying to bridge the gap of understanding between black and white Americans. What we need here is serious analysis and honest discussion about differences, not some phantom white supremacist madness. Also, we don't need fanatical ideology either.
I would also argue that the flames of this fire are fed quite often by right-wing rhetoric, often from people who don't necessarily share these radical views, who don't in fact share these radical views, but who sort of incite these feelings of white victimhood. They're taking something away from you, and it's no secret where you hear that kind of rhetoric. It's all over the airwaves.
Mr. Robinson, who works for the Washington Post, makes a living out of demonizing conservative Americans. That's what he does. Right-wing rhetoric? Yeah, that's a ticket. That's what's causing all of these mass murders. Never mind that far-left rhetoric, far more hateful these days and what the hard right puts out. Mr. Robinson is a fanatical left-wing individual, once again playing the ideological card in a bizarre way. Of course, none of this nonsense addresses the key question. How do we stop terrorists like Dylann Roof? As Talking Point stated last night, we live in a free country where crazy people are allowed to roam free until they do something heinous. Everybody who knew Dylann Roof understood he was an unstable, racist individual. But you can't do anything to a person like that until he or she commits a crime. That's the price we pay for freedom. It is long past time for all Americans to demand honesty from our leadership. Yesterday, President Obama again played the anti-gun card, but the president's hometown, Chicago, has stringent anti-gun laws. Yet the gun crime situation there remains out of control. In the next segment, I'll tell you how gun crime can be curtailed. And it's very simple. But does Barack Obama and the anti-gun lobby really want to stop gun crimes? Do they really? I don't think so, because there's an easy way to do it without all the crazy rhetoric. Summing up, Talking Points urges all decent Americans to understand there is evil among us, and there is no solution to that evil. All we can do is try to minimize and isolate the actions of disturbed individuals like Roof. This country is somewhat united against terrorism abroad. Now we have to come together to fight it at home. And that's a memo.